Всем привет, Elvin here. How is everyone doing? I hope you're doing well, especially during these difficult times right now. Today we are going to be creating a checklist for our camera settings so that we can use this and tick it off before we start making our videos. Now this is going to be the first video in a series that I'm going to be making throughout the next couple of weeks, and this is basically me tackling the different difficulties and challenges that I've been facing while making videos for YouTube, as well as some work for my friends. If you didn't see those videos where I was criticizing my work and reflecting on the journey so far, do check them out. I'll put them over here or on the bottom somewhere. And there I go in detail with everything. But to summarize, basically it boils down to three topics. You have the camera shyness and everything to do with talking in front of a camera. We have the overall low quality of my videos. And then we have the editing process, which also was quite difficult and had its own quirks in it. Now within the video quality topic, I did identify a couple of subcategories which all did their part to reduce the quality of my videos. And this being the general lack of planning or the pre-production process, which involves making notes, the script, making shot lists, checking the camera gear, checking the camera settings, which is what we're going to be talking today. Also, apart from that, we have the poor audio, poor lighting, and also the general lack of experience when it comes to using my gear and filming in general. Now, so far, I have already ticked off two things, which is the audio. I am sure I'm using this Snowball to record my audio, and I hope you can hear better audio as well. And also the editing process has become much easier and quicker, and the rendering is just lightning fast thanks to the custom PC that I built and this huge screen, which is a game changer. So now let's look into the camera settings. So instead of taking the easy route and just going to the internet and finding some checklist, I thought I'll be more responsible and I'll go the difficult route, which was to learn all the camera settings on my camera and then decide what I'm going to be including in my checklist. And the cool thing about all of this is that after sitting down and learning all the internal beauty of my camera, now I have a much closer bond with it, just like going on a date with a girl. To begin with, I turned on my camera, I put it into video mode, and I made a picture of the LCD screen. Logically, I thought that most probably most of the essential and important settings should be on your LCD screen. So I set to learn those before moving to the general menu, which is a bit more sophisticated and has much more settings in them. So I have it here on my phone. Let's go through all of them, let's try to understand them, and then create this checklist right now. Starting with the top left corner, we have the battery and the time. The battery is, well, the battery remaining, and then the time represents the amount of time left to shoot, which directly corresponds to the space that we have left on our SD card. Now in this case, my card is completely formatted, so it's 30 minutes. And beside it we have an icon of a camera with an M on it. This represents the shooting mode, and in this specific case the M stands for manual, because obviously we are not children, we are badass filmmakers. Now shooting mode, I'm definitely adding it to my list, even though this is the first thing that we check usually whenever we are turning on our camera. It still doesn't hurt to have it as the first thing on our list, since sometimes we can be in auto or in any other scene by accident. Then the next setting on the list is the focus. The icon varies depending on the mode that you're in, whether auto or manual or one of the auto settings. Honestly, I think it's a topic on its own for another video. Definitely something that I need to check in more detail. But I'm definitely adding focus to my list because I already had situations where I would have to reshoot the whole video twice, because in both cases I was always out of focus and I only realized when I pulled the videos on the screen. So definitely something to check, not only the focus type, but also to make sure that I'm actually in focus. So in this case, I'm using the face tracking, since it just keeps me always in focus when I'm moving around. Next one up, we have the resolution and the frame rate. Definitely extremely important. I'm gonna be writing this even right now. Resolution and FPS. When it comes to resolution, obviously we want to max this one out. The higher the resolution, the better quality of our image is, and we can always scale it down if we need to, whereas we cannot do it the other way around. But of course it depends on the workflow of someone. If you don't really need 4K, then you can go with 1920 by 1080, no problem there. It's still high quality and just uses less space. So it's really up to you, but definitely something we need to check and make sure that it is correct. And then we have the frames per second. Now this one, again, depends on what you're shooting at. So if you want a more cinematic look or film look, you want to go for 24 frames per second. The standard is like 30, the normal one that everyone usually shoots. Then you have 60, which is just much better because it has more frames, so it's kind of smoother and can be used for slow motion. And then you have 120 frames per second, which is just gives you this buttery smooth slow motion, which unfortunately my camera does not have. Anyways, very important, because I already made this mistake where I was shooting everything at 30 frames per second, although I should have shot everything at 60, knowing that I wanted to slow down footage. Now, one important thing that I wanted to mention is the fact that you might not find 30 or 60 FPS on your camera, like in my case. I have 50 and 25. And I actually thought that 25 is equivalent to 24 FPS. And the reality is that actually 25, which is something to do with the European standards and also in other countries like Arab Emirates, I think, 25 frames per second is equivalent to 30 frames per second in US. And then 50 FPS for us is equivalent to 60 in US. I don't know the whole science behind this or the reason. Do let me know in the comment section below. I would love to learn about this, but just keep that in mind. The next icon is the stabilization. This one just tells you whether it's on or off, and basically the camera's voodoo that fights the whole camera shake and motion blur. Now, I'm not going to be adding it to my list because, well, what's the point? It's always on and I have no idea why would you even turn it off. Again, let me know in the comment section below if you have any reasons why you would turn off the stabilization in the camera. Below the stabilization, we have an icon called video snapshot. I really don't understand the point of it. Basically, it allows us to make 2 to 8 second videos. I mean, if I need to make something for Instagram, I can use my phone. But yeah, I'm not putting it on my checklist at all. Next, we have the MP4 icon, the Wi-Fi off, and the servo AF. Now the MP4 just lets us know in what kind of format we're shooting our videos. Now in my case, I didn't find any setting that would allow me to change it. I know that some cameras do allow you to shoot in other formats, like for example MOV. Again, this one really depends on if your camera does allow it or not and your workflow, so I'm not adding anything to my checklist. Then we have the Wi-Fi off, also not in my checklist, since this just tells me whether the camera is connected over Wi-Fi to my phone using the Canon app. The servo AF is part of the focusing and it's always on by default, and actually if you press on it, it will just pause it. You cannot turn it off. And what it does is allows us to smoothly zoom between one point and another, especially if you press on the LCD screen. So it's by default on. I don't see why I would turn it off or pause it, so I'm keeping it, I'm not adding it to my checklist. Next we have the shutter, aperture and ISO. I'm skipping ahead a little bit because it's part of the exposure triangle. Definitely has to be on the list. So shutter, ISO and f-stop. These ones definitely have to be on my list. I need to make sure that they are set properly. When it comes to shutter, it has to be double of our frame rate, so I'm shooting at 30 FPS or 25, so my shutter is 1/50. And then you have the aperture and the ISO, which really depends on how much light you have around. Next, to the left of our ISO, we have the exposure compensation icon. It looks like this plus minus black and white plus 0, or it can look like a bar with numbering from -3 to 3. And basically it's a setting that overrides the camera's metering, allowing us to change the brightness to brighter or darker. And camera metering is the camera's way to determine the best exposure for a photo. So as you can understand, this is an auto setting. It works in auto plus or in all the other scene modes. In manual photo mode, if you look at it, it will not do anything if you change it. And actually, it just helps you to understand if you are underexposed or overexposed. So you can use it as a guide, but it doesn't affect anything. But interestingly enough, in video, if you press on it and you try to change it, it does brighten or darken the image, but I don't see the point of it if I'm in manual settings and I'm going to be using the exposure triangle to set my exposure. So it's on 0 and I'm going to be keeping it there, and I'm not including this on my checklist. Moving upwards, the next icon is the auto lighting optimizer. I think it's called like that. And well, again, it's something that changes your brightness and contrast. But again, what's the point of you putting it on and if it's auto setting if we're in manual? So it's off and it's gonna stay forever off. Moving up to the more important stuff, we have the picture style. This one I am adding it to my list as well. Picture style. And basically what this one does is allows us to kind of modify a little bit our videos while we're shooting. So for instance, I always go in and I change it to neutral style, which kind of tones down a little bit the saturation of all the colors from my understanding. And it gives me a little bit more flexibility when I'm coloring my footage in DaVinci Resolve. I know people like to go inside and go to the custom settings and change, for instance, the sharpness. Some people don't like the sharpness of the camera at all and they prefer to do this in post. But you also have settings like monochrome, which allows us to just film everything in black and white. So really it's quite handy. I definitely need to look into this more and how to properly use this one, but definitely goes on my list. And the next one is the white balance. Definitely going into my list. Considered an essential. Now this setting basically tells the camera what is white. You see, our brain is very clever, so whenever we see white, we know it's white no matter what. So for instance, like this area above my monitor is a little bit yellowish because of the reflections from the sun coming from the window. But a bit further behind the camera, it's a little bit blue because it's reflecting more the sky. But I still know it's white. And here I know it's white. And even if we put like, I don't know, a blue bulb, I will still know that it is white. But the camera doesn't. So we need to tell the camera depending on what lighting we're using. Now there's a couple of handy auto features, and actually right now I am in auto settings. I am looking at myself and more or less it's a good representation of white, especially my t-shirt. If I feel like I need to tweak it a little bit, no problem, I'll just do it in post. But it does have some predefined options that you could use, for instance, outdoor, sunny day, cloudy day, or like fluorescent light. So really different scenarios, and you can kind of correct it with those auto settings, or you can go full custom if you want. Now, in terms of the whole importance of this, I'll definitely going to be looking at this in a future video, because I think this one does need its own video. And the final icon on the LCD screen is the Q button. This one is the quick menu. Once you press on it, it allows us to change all those settings that are on the LCD screen. Whew, that was a lot of settings, but there's always more. In my case, when you press the menu button, it opens up a more sophisticated menu where you can change all the same settings that you have on the LCD screen, but also it has some additional settings. I went through all of them. I'm not going to go in this video, but the point is that I went through all of them and I realized that they're all on default and there is no reason why I would change them, except for two things which I am going to be adding to my checklist. The first one is audio. Now this one, I'm going to be putting it audio. Audio is important when you have an external microphone attached to your camera. In my case, I don't have one, but I'll still put it for future, but also it'll just remind me to check my audio levels of my microphone that is connected to the computer at the same time. The point is that our volume should not go above 0. If it goes, it means it's clipping and distorting, and you'll hear it's going to be just weird and bad. The general practice, a good one, is just to limit your audio at around -3 dB more or less, and you can actually set it on your camera, the limit, and this way you'll always be in a safe zone. And the final setting that I'll be adding to my checklist is format card. But with this setting, I'm gonna add an additional word in big, bold letters, which is backup. That's right, formatting the card is important to make sure to have enough space on your card before you start shooting. Now ideally you're gonna have multiple SD cards, but you could be like me in the beginning and just have one. I should probably get one more, really. But super important, back up your files on your computer or on your hard drive or both, it's even more preferable, before you press the format button. Please do me a favor, don't make those kind of mistakes. And that is pretty much it when it comes to this whole checklist. I've already implemented for this video, and as you can see, the quality is much better. Do not hesitate to use this checklist for yourself. However, I do recommend to do the same thing that I did. Take your camera on a date, check all your settings, learn them better, and then choose for yourself what you want to put in your checklist, or just kind of edit mine and add or subtract some of the things. I know that depending on the manufacturer of the camera or the let's say the tier of the camera, so more expensive cameras, they can have some additional settings on it, so you might want to add them. Really up to you. The point is that we will be updating this one and modernizing it as the time goes. So thank you for watching, and I see you in the next one. Пока!